Broadcasting from the studio at the Levan Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University, welcome to Levan Center Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, innovators, and those that foster the Florida business ecosystem.
Hi, and welcome back to Levan Center Live. Thrilled to be back with you once again. Thank you, subscribers, and thank you, first-time listeners. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you like the podcast. I'm Jim Ryan. Of course, I'm joined here at the Levan Center with Kelly Shanley, who's interim director of the Levan Center of Innovation here at Nova Southeastern University. And Kelly, good morning, and thanks again for joining me.
Always good to be with you, buddy.
Well, we are thrilled. This is an amazing podcast. Of course, we talk to civic leaders, those that are successful executives, those that foster the ecosystem in the state of Florida. And of course, I can't think of someone more important at the epicenter of fostering our youth today than our guest, Laurie Sallarulo, who is Chief Executive Officer, President of Junior Achievement of South Florida. And so happy to have you here. And I'm excited because Junior Achievement is really where it's at, and it's a thrilling organization. So thanks so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I love it.
So this is amazing. So we kind of bifurcate this a little bit because I want to hear about all the amazing things that you and the rock stars at Junior Achievement are doing. But I want to parse that out to our later segment because I want to hear about the Sallarulo story, about your background and so forth. And it's a little bit of a get to know you. And I know just a little tidbit that you are in the process of writing a book.
I am.
So I want to see if I could pull some of that out of you, Laurie. So
little preview.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
So we get a little preview of that. So, but tell us a little bit about your success. Where did you grow up? A little bit about your background.
So, well, thanks. And I may not tell you everything. But, I grew up in New York to two parents who spent their careers in education. My mom eventually became a superintendent of schools in Baltimore City, and my dad was an executive vice president of a college and was dean of students. So for me, I grew up in classrooms, right, sitting in my mom's classroom or going with my dad out into the marginalized communities. He was really big on working with our youth who, right, didn't have all those resources and things at their fingertips. And so I got to go on outward bound trips with him into the community, into Washington, right, and working with those communities. And so I think this is something that has always been in my blood or in my upbringing. So it kind of feels natural that I ended up here. But I actually didn't start my career in nonprofit. Started my career in banking. So my degree is in finance and business. And so I went into banking, went to an amazing organization. I worked for Ogilvy and Mather, which at that time was New York, the second largest advertising industry in the world.
Yeah.
Now it's called Ogilvy. And I had great opportunities over there for about 14 years. And really, I started in finance and general accounting and quickly learned that I absolutely did not want to be in general accounting. It was not my thing. And I should have listened to the first Myers-Briggs test that I ever took, which said I should be in sales, but I didn't listen, and I ended up in finance. But I was really, really fortunate. And I think this is really important, especially for our young people. And that's why I love what we do at JA. There was a woman that I worked for who wasn't always the kindest leader. And there were a lot of things about her that I definitely didn't want to repeat. However, she saw something in me and she pushed me and she threw me into the deep end. I can't tell you how many times. And I learned things about myself. I learned the skills that I think have helped me to be successful today. And, so sometimes people are tough, but when they see potential in you, right, we think they're being tough and we think they're being mean, but really look at the opportunities that they're giving us to grow. And so I ended up coming out of general finance and going into all kinds of different positions, running 200 teams, 200 people on a team, to doing organizational development in a company that size was, I got to travel and train areas all around the country. So I had opportunities to really develop the skills that today our kids are lacking, right? And our educational system being so focused on academics is not um, preparing them with. So I did that, came down here to Florida to get married, and there really was no advertising industry down here. So I was at a loss. So I went back to finance in the hotel business for about a year and hated my life. But then I got pregnant with my son, Patrick, who was born with Down syndrome, many people know. And which is really interesting because I do believe God works in mysterious ways. When I was in high school, you always had the opportunity to go out and volunteer and work with organizations. I worked with at that time, what was called an institution, people with mental handicaps. Today, we don't use any of those terms, right? Today, we use intellectually challenged or disabled, and we certainly don't have institutions anymore. And so I worked with kids with Down syndrome. They were my favorites. All kids with disabilities, but the ones with Downs were just my favorites.
Oh my gosh.
The most unconditional, loving human beings on this earth. And so when Patrick was born, it was not a problem for me. I was so used to being with these young people that I was like, okay, we have a baby with Downs. We got this, right? And I remember for 1 minute, because I don't want you to think that while I did that, it wasn't that little bit of fear, because I think in everything that happens in our life that's unexpected or that brings change, there is always that sense of fear. And I remember thinking and saying out loud, how do I care for him? Because while I had volunteered with kids with Downs, I had never had full responsibility for one. And I remember the person, it was probably a social worker of some type. And she said, just like you would care for any baby. And I was like, oh, I got this, right? And from that moment on, I became entrenched in children's welfare, children's advocacy, especially around children with special needs. And that's how I kind of started to get my feet wet into the nonprofit world. Decided not to go back to work full time, but to bring up Patrick. I then had Samantha 2 years later. And I remember with Patrick, I kept thinking, okay, I need to make sure I give him every resource and opportunity that I can give him to be the best, most productive, responsible adult and member of our community. I thought that was because he had special needs. Then Samantha was born, and guess what? I wanted the same thing for her. And today, I get to do that with 80,000 kids a year. So anyway, fast forward, sat on all kinds of boards appointed by the governor to Children's Services Council, Children's Services Board, advocate, Special Olympics, raising money. And so I really learned the whole nonprofit fundraising programming world through my volunteer work. And then about 12 years later, I went through a divorce and said, okay, what's my next chapter look like? And I knew it was not going back to corporate. I knew it would be a nonprofit. And I will never forget this. Friend of mine came and said, there's a VP of development positions at Habitat for Humanity. And I'm like, I don't have the experience to be that. She said, I know, but you would be great. And so I went for it. And I remember the executive director at the time, Jason, I will never forget, he looked at me and he said, but you don't have the experience. I said, I know, but I have the relationships in the community and I have the passion. And I know I could do this job. I had no idea I could do the job. I was faking it. Absolutely
fake it till you make it, as they say.
And he took a chance on me. And I remember I had to raise $1 million a year when I started. And I remember going home and I had just started dating Mike DeLuca, who I've been with now for 21 years, my significant other. And at 6 months in, I said to him, I don't know if I can do this. And he said, well, you better figure it out because you need a job. And so I was like, okay, I have to figure this out. And within 3 years, we were raising $4 to $5 million. We had tripled the number of homes we were building. And I had found my passion, which was being able to do sales, like my Myers-Briggs said I should, although in a fundraising way, and mixing that with changing a community. So that was the start of my career in nonprofit. Went and ran a small organization in Miami called SHAPE. came back, ran Leadership Broward as CEO. And then I said, I'm tired of raising money. I want to give out money. So I went to PNC Bank and gave out the money. But quite honestly, as nice as that was, it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
I wanted to be boots on the ground and changing systems and changing lives. And then had the opportunity to interview for JA, which was not something I really wanted to do. I kind of got pushed by a mentor because if you know the story, we lost the CEO 11 years ago to a tragic accident. And I knew that it would be a very difficult transition because she was so loved and they were still in mourning and grieving. But somebody convinced me to do it and I took it and here I am 10 years later. So that's kind of the story.
Amazing.
That's pretty good. Okay, so many questions. I do actually want to circle back to your comment about the tough boss at Ogilvy. And because I think it's an important message about, how you kind of maximize value from a tough situation. My question is, and I don't think there's a right answer to this. I'm just curious your perspective. You said that she saw something in you. So I'm wondering if what you learned from having a tough boss was dependent at all on her motives. If she was just tough, but you didn't feel like she saw something in you, would that have been different? Or was it really important for you to know she saw, and how did you know?
Right. I'm not sure I realized until after.
Yeah.
Right. At the time going through it. Now, I think there's a difference in how you're a tough boss. So let me start with that.
Okay.
I think you can be a direct, tough boss, right? Or when I say tough, having those high expectations for your team members and your organization. That's how I define tough. Her definition of tough was disrespectful and sometimes unprofessional. And she'd have no problem calling you all kinds of names in a meeting with lots of people.
Oh.
And that is not what I think of as, right?
Yes.
How I think we should lead.
Great distinction.
Okay. So I want to make sure that I'm clear that being a tough boss, meaning you have high expectations, is very different than being disrespectful and unprofessional. So I really want to make sure that that's clear. I believe that the kindest thing we can do as leaders is be direct when we see the potential in someone. If I let you continue to go and not truly help you to see where you're struggling, because you may not realize it. Not everyone is self-aware.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the key components to being a successful leader is self-awareness, right? But if we don't help people find their blind spots and see their blind spots, sometimes, right, they can miss out on the potential that they truly have.
Right.
So I think that she taught me that being direct with people who have the potential to be better, to be great, is absolutely something they deserve. They may not like it, and I can assure you they don't like it.
Yeah.
But no one can ever walk away from a conversation with me and say that I was disrespectful or unprofessional. It's always focused on how they can grow, right? So I think she taught me how I wanted to be that tough leader,
right?
That direct person who would nurture and develop people. But I don't think I realized that she saw the potential in me until later on. She never told you that.
Right.
I would just look at her and go, I don't know how to do this. Like, you're throwing me into something. I have no idea. And she would look at me and say, well, figure it out or we're both going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
She never said, Laurie, I have full faith that you can do this.
And
tell my people.
And so that occurs again, but you're the one who decided to jump into that role that you didn't have any experience in.
Correct.
So she was giving you responsibility for something that she believed you could do, but you didn't.
Right.
Years later, you decided, do you think those were related? Did
Absolutely.
it teach you that? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it also taught me to say to someone, I know you got this.
Yes.
I know you're scared.
Yes.
I know you think you can't do this.
Right.
I know you can do this. That's what she also taught me,
Yes.
how to frame it, right? Because she never told me she had the confidence in me.
Right.
And it wasn't until later on that I looked back and said, she really did me a favor.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, maybe I didn't like the way she did it, but she gave me opportunities to develop skills that I would have never had
Yeah.
she not seen the potential in me.
Well, that's what
Right.
I wanted to kind of tee up on Kelly's question, where you said that she helped you develop the skills that you didn't see in yourself, and because you run a large organization today, you teach entrepreneurship, you've been entrepreneurial, and you've been an incredible amount of life challenges that many might have cratered to some of those, one or two of those types of life challenges. So you combine this sort of moxie, this grit, the ability to reinvent yourself. Where does that come from? I mean, are you pulling it out from within, or are you kind of learning as you go, or is it a combination of all of those things?
I think it's a combination, actually. Again, I saw two parents who were so ambitious, hardworking, um, always wanting, to get ahead, to better the lives of others, as well as, build their own careers. So I certainly think, look, my dad was a professional athlete. He was extremely competitive.
What sport?
Baseball.
How about that?
Played for the Detroit Tigers. And then my brother played professional baseball, and my nephew played farm team ball. So I come from a family of athletes. So I think grit and competition are built into my DNA because that's what I saw. I spent my childhood on baseball fields, right? Watching my dad coach, right? Watching competition.
What an amazing experience, life
Yeah.
experience of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that because that's kind of what the book is about, right?
I knew I was going to get it out of
Yeah.
you.
Right.
There are other things that I have been through in my life that required me to have that grit and required me to keep moving forward. And it wasn't always easy. And I definitely didn't always have the confidence that I have today, right? I think as a young person, and I see that today also, our young people don't have the confidence. And that's where anxiety and depression and all of that comes from. That's another reason I love JA. We get to build that confidence. But somebody asked me one day, you have been through a lot of stuff, right? My daughter, who is an amazing, amazing young woman today, doing her master's right here at Nova Southeastern University. But she had her struggles, right? I went through a long, difficult divorce. And kids always pay the price for that. Whether you intentionally mean for you don't ever intentionally mean for that to happen, but it does, right? They pay the price, and to watch her and how she came out of it. But those were some difficult years for both of us, right? For her and I. Losing my dad at 55 suddenly was another time of my life that was really difficult, a very unexpected. Sudden change in my life, and he was the rock of my life.
How old was he when he passed?
55.
Very young, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
On the racquetball court, though, competing against 22-year-olds, which is exactly the way he would have wanted it to be.
Wow.
I was born with an eye challenge, and as a young child, had to wear patches on my good eye. And so I'd walk into desks and had to have my face right up against the paper and got bullied. Right. I had to develop that grit as a child. And so all of those things are in the book. And somebody asked me one day, well, how did you get from there? They don't even know about all the stuff in the childhood part. Right.
Sure.
But what they do know is the difficult time of the divorce. And the book is not about the divorce. So I want to be very clear about that. But I was beaten down. So how do you come back? How do you reinvent yourself from any kind of adversity? And I think I didn't really know the answer when they asked me, but it made me think about it. And when I sat down to think about it, I came up all C words, were all the words that helped me get through it. And so I'm like, there's got to be a book in here somewhere. And so the name of the book is The C Word. No, not that one. And
That's a great title.
you'll find out why not that one when you read it. But it's 9 C words that really helped me go from right where I was so many times in my life to the coming out right successful on the other side.
I'm going to bring that that grit and that confidence idea right into the JA work. And Jim and I were talking before you got here that we saw you post yesterday about the Girls Rule event. And so when you were talking about the importance of confidence and instilling that in others, like that felt like a moment where you were doing just that. Talk about that event specifically, but talk about, given your story, how you feel leading an organization like this and being able to create programs like that and what you put into it personally.
I think that's what I love most about my job is that, yes, I spend a lot of time making sure that we have the financial resources for the organization, running the operation and building a culture, which I can tell you is the hardest part, in my opinion, of any leader's job is building a culture and building a high-performing team. But I think the other part of it is for me, I love being able to create programs that really, truly change their lives. And so Girls Rule, so I have a tendency of coming up with ideas and my teams always look at me like, oh God. Sometimes they look at me and go, okay, that is the worst idea we ever heard. And I'm like, okay, fine. You're right. It wasn't the best one. Or there are times when they look at me and they say, oh, that is such a good idea. Now we're going to have to do it. Right. And so Girls Rule was an idea. So when I was at Leadership Broward, I started a program called Women Leading Broward, which is still going on today. Because I believe that there is a huge gap in leadership development for that middle manager leader level, right? We take people and we throw them into manager and leadership positions with no training. And so I think companies today really have the opportunity to invest in that level. So Women Leading Broward was about doing just that. And I'm proud to say it's still going on today. When I was at Habitat, I got hired to do development. But I saw that, well, wait a minute. We give these adults homes. How do we change the cycle if we don't get to the kids?
Right.
So I went to the executive director at the time and said, Jason, we've got to do something with our kids. And he said, well, if you can find the funding for it, you can design the program. And so that was kind of my first program design opportunity. And I just loved it.
Yeah.
And of course, found the donor, someone you know dearly, Miss Marty Heisinger, who was like, oh, yes, we have. Or she believed, and I agree with her, right? We have to teach a man to fish. And so if we could get to the kids and change the cycle, right, we could change the future. And so I got the chance to dabble in creating programs, and I loved it. And I always say, if you build it, they will come, right? So sometimes you build it without the funding, which is a risk.
Yeah.
But it's like research and development in the business world, right? You don't always have the funding.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you're not developing the next product, you're obsolete. You'll become obsolete. And so I think in nonprofit, we don't see enough funders who are willing to fund pilots or research and development. And I think we need more of that. So I know that was a side note, but so anyway, so Girls Rule became, so I came to my team, said, want to do this event for girls. They really need us. The confidence level, right? It's tough being a young girl today. It's tough being a young kid today. And so we came up with the idea, and sure enough, what happens? COVID. And so they said, well, we can't do it. I said, oh, yes, we can. We're going to do it virtually. And so we did it virtually with 75 girls on the line. And we did the whole Zoom thing where they go into different breakout rooms. And,
remember.
And it went great.
Learned how to use that.
And it went great. And so we said, okay, great. This was really good. The girls loved it. The mentors loved it. The women. And so the second year we said, okay, now we can go in person. We went out to 2 high schools and brought the program into the high schools. That was really labor intensive. And what we found was the girls really want to get out of school. They want to get off campus. Our kids today want to get out of the classroom. That is across the board.
Right.
And so the fourth year, we said, okay, we're going to bring it to JA. So we recruited girls from 8 schools. We had about 200 girls, and recruited the mentors, got some sponsors, and it was a huge hit.
Yeah.
And then the following year, we added the fashion show, where we picked 2 girls from each school. This year, we had 11 schools. We actually turned away some schools because we didn't have the room or the fund or the sponsorships to go to the next level. But the team is both the volunteer team and the internal team are like, we are going bigger next year. And
Great.
so we have the fashion show now. You can see the confidence just beaming from these girls by the end of the day.
Right.
And so we have a former Miss Universe who works with them to teach them how to walk
that's
the
great.
runway that morning while the other girls are in some things. They do workshops on all different topics, which are brought to them by our sponsor, facilitators. And we purposely pick the young rising leaders of those organizations, right? They don't want me.
Right.
They don't want to hear from me. And then they do roundtables with C-levels like me or any age. And then we do the fashion show. And we usually have a keynote woman speaker. These are 350 girls from our marginalized communities who don't have the opportunity to hear from women like this.
Right.
And most of the women look just like them. This is purposeful and very intentional of what we're doing. And it's interesting because I've had some private schools reach out and say, but all our girls need this. And they're right.
Yeah.
This is not an income thing. While our girls from our more affluent communities have the resources, they still don't have the confidence.
Right. Sure.
And so I don't know what that looks like going forward. But anyway, so that's how Girls Rule came to be. I don't know who gets more out of this day, the women who are involved than the girls, but it is equally as fulfilling for all of us.
Well, you could see and sense from Laurie. I mean, first of all, I'm not a girl, but I would love to be involved in that program.
Right.
I love the passion and the enthusiasm. I mean, and you could tell your job as president and CEO, this is not a job, a paycheck. This is a passion for you. And I want to sort of describe, if you will, because you and your team do such great work. Tens of thousands of our youth go through over the years through junior achievement. And junior achievement in South Florida operates a little more unique than some other junior achievements that are around the country, BizTown and so forth. For our listeners, describe the program itself and describe the operations that you lead there in South Florida.
Sure. Well, first of all, we are fortunate to have the largest single facility in the world. There are about 41 JA educational centers around the world. That number has grown dramatically since we built ours. Wayne Huizinga led the charge to get that building built and brought other business people along. It's 60,000 square feet. It was built for the JA BizTown program, which is 5th graders, and JA Finance Park program, which is 8th graders. One of the things that I have to really highlight is the partnership with Broward County Public Schools. We are so fortunate. I don't know that we're the only nonprofit that has this agreement, or if there's one or two others. Every single 5th grader does the JA BizTown program, which starts with 20 curriculum lessons in the classroom, which are very interactive, and then prepares them for the simulation in BizTown, in JA World, where they run the city. And that is across all 3 pillars: entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and workforce skills. To see it in action is just amazing. You think our 5th graders, I talk to people now, because the center has been open for 15 years, that went through BizTown, and they can tell you their exact job.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I have had young people tell me that it influenced what they wanted to study, right? One in particular told me about media and communications because she was the anchor at the TV station. Then we have a partnership with Broward County Schools that every single 8th grader will do Finance Park. So again, curriculum in the classroom and then the simulation. They don't run the town. That is for us. So JA South Florida tends to be, for lack of a better word, a little bit of a rebel across the nation. Not surprising, I
Such a
guess.
shocker.
I was gonna say, with you
Such a
running it,
shocker that
right.
Laurie is a little bit of a rebel. That's a competition thing in me, right? But I'm not a status quo person.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is good, but our kids don't really look engaged. And Finance Park was built when financial literacy was really much more of a prevalent issue. For the last 10 years, financial literacy has kind of fallen down in the ranks, unfortunately. And the most important thing in our state and across our country is workforce education, right? You have legislation now that is saying every middle schooler must have workforce education, a career exploration experience.
Right.
You have legislation that says every high school student must have a work-based learning experience. The state, the local communities, the county, the school district, everyone is now catching on to the fact that workforce education, we have to teach skills young.
Yes.
I also chair the Early Learning Coalition. Guess what? We should be teaching our preschoolers workforce skills.
Mm-hmm.
They can learn problem solving and critical thinking and communication and presentation at 3 to 5 years old. I am a firm believer that these are skills we should be embedding into education. But our leadership made a decision when I came that we were not going to focus on any programs under the age of 5th grade, which was BizTown, and anything that did not have a minimum of 25 hours of instruction. To do an hour or two of instruction in a classroom is not going to change mindsets.
Yes.
This is not just about building skill sets, it's about changing their mindset. And if we don't do that, right, we're not going to create the next generation of entrepreneurs, as I call them, right?
Yes.
And so 9 years ago, as I got my feet wet into junior achievement, I realized we were missing a huge population of high schoolers. And I remember when I started at JA and I was sitting around these tables, people were talking, we have to teach our college kids job skills. And I'm thinking, college?
Too late at that point.
Right.
Oh my gosh, we're in trouble if we're waiting till college.
Still true.
And I can tell you that I was probably a thorn in a lot of people's sides, and they got tired of hearing me say, because they probably thought it was from the lens of junior achievement, but it wasn't. It was in the lens of, as a mom, as a child advocate, that we have to start embedding these skills and mindsets into our kids from a very young age. And so then it moved to high school. Now we see it in middle school, right? We're seeing the legislation. So we started to create the high school programs. So having run Leadership Broward, I will give them credit for one of our programs, which is called JA Career Bound. It is the same format as Leadership Broward, where our kids come to a retreat at the beginning of the year, and then once a month they go out into the community. But they're not learning about community issues. They're learning about industries and career pathways.
Great.
Then we embedded case challenges. So you could come and present a case challenge where they're using digital skills, AI. Now we've embedded AI for research, and they have to come back with solutions, and they compete on those solutions, presenting to the business. And then we prepare them with heavy resume building, interviewing skills, networking skills, and then we place them in jobs. So last summer, we placed over 300 students in summer jobs,
Wow,
paid
that's
summer
fantastic.
jobs. We are the only JA doing that. So this model is unique. But now we are, from a JUSA level, they are really shifting the model with our new president. So I'm thrilled about that. Then we have our JA Entrepreneurship Program, which is JA Fellows. We have 600 students who go through. This is not like any other high school entrepreneurship curriculum that I'm aware of. They start real companies. We give them $100 to start. They have to go out and find investors, stockholders. They get investments. They source their product. They come up with their idea, very much like what you're doing here at the Levan Center,
Sure.
right? They have to ideate. Then they have to actually build their businesses, source their product, market their product, sell their product, deal with customer service. They create websites, they create videos for their companies, and they have to sell.
Yeah.
And they have to run a real company. Guess what? They're up at 4 a.m. sometimes because they have to get on the phone with China because they're having trouble sourcing. Logistics, supply chain,
Fantastic.
break-even analysis, cost analysis. You talk about a workforce skills program, we call it entrepreneurship. I don't care if those kids ever go start a business.
Right.
But the skill sets that they are learning,
Will carry with them in so many other areas in their lives.
and the most important lesson is the failure.
Yes.
Because some of our companies, our student companies, don't make it. And when they tell you at the end of the year what the lessons were, the lessons all came from failure. That is where we gain the most knowledge,
Yes.
right, and have the most growth. And so I love that program. And then at the end, in April, they do a competition called the Spark Tank Finale. And with our judges, right? I think you're going to be a judge this
That's
year,
right.
actually.
Yep. You signed me up to be a shark.
I did. He's going to be a shark. Kelly will pull you in at some point.
Okay.
And they compete at a local level for Company of the Year, and then they go on to national. We have had teams go on to national every single year. Then we created our pre-apprenticeship is our other big, really, I would say, iconic program. This is not being done by any other JA also. We are a state certified pre-apprenticeship. There's only 2 in Broward. With the state, we are now in 4 industries, construction, marine, telecommunications, and rural water management. Next year, we'll expand to healthcare. So we recruit between 250 and 300 kids a year into the pre-apprenticeship. These are kids who are not on a college path, not on a CTE path, and have no idea where they're going after high school. Excuse me. And so if we can grab some of these young people who don't have any direction, working very closely with the district. By the way, all of these things we do are in complete partnership with our district. As a matter of fact, this afternoon, I have a strategic planning session with our superintendent, who I think is amazing. And I really am excited about what will happen under his direction and leadership. And so now we've placed about 75 students already in trades jobs in those 4 industries.
Great.
Over the last 2 years. And we have about another 80 to 90 in the pipeline, which we are working to find recruiters to place those kids in jobs. And then we have our 3DE high school model, which we have 2 schools here in Broward, MacArthur and Flanagan. There are 40 schools around the nation. And that is truly changing high school education. That is the data that's coming out of that is showing huge increases in student engagement, huge decreases in student absenteeism, increases in performance as far as competencies in math and English, teacher recruitment, teacher retention. Our district is looking to increase the number of schools that we're doing, 3D schools. It's an expensive model, but it is transforming high school education.
Yeah.
So that's for us here locally. We are all about changing systems. We want to change the workforce. We want to work with CareerSource Broward, right, and the school district to help get those seniors in high school, right,
Yeah.
into
Ready.
those apprenticeships, right? We're
Yeah.
into CareerSource Broward to help them find jobs as adults. And I know that you're extremely involved in that. So nothing we are doing is about competing or duplicating. We wanted to fill that gap, right? And make
Yes.
sure that we could get to as many high school students and get them onto the paths. And then we do our stock market challenge, which is financial literacy. Because if kids are going to earn money, they have to learn how to manage it. And more importantly, they have to know how to grow it. That is an exciting event. That is like being on the stock market floor. So there's so much going on at JA, but we're out of space. And that's
Yeah.
why we're actually looking at building another facility
Oh, that's
for high school
exciting.
and above.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we do have a lead donor already, actually,
Okay.
to name the center. Broward Schools is on board, Superintendent Hepburn. We need this in order to continue to grow and scale those programs. And we're also looking and working with the district on a high school mandate, right? So I mentioned 5th grade,
Yeah.
every 5th grader,
Right.
every 8th grader. Well, now we're looking at building a program for every 10th grader.
Great.
That is something we have talked about for years. But now that we have, right, stable leadership at the district, I will tell you, Dr. Hepburn is a huge believer in experiential learning and wants more JA. And so that's just building on that partnership is going to be critical, I think, over the next few years.
I just want to take a moment to give you credit for something that I'm hearing come out of you that I think any organization, but certainly nonprofit leaders that have a mission to serve the community, need leaders like you that are paying attention to everything that is happening around them in the community, understanding what we're trying to achieve as a community and connecting to those broader community goals through what you do. Like that was everything I was hearing from you for the last, 5 minutes here was understanding what's needed and what role JA can play in making that a reality. And that's so important for nonprofit leaders to understand.
I think there's two things for me as a nonprofit leader. And one is that, right? Where are the gaps and how can we help? For me, it's always about how can we help, right? How can we help the community and how can we raise up our young people? Because as a mom, I understand how important that is. I think the second piece is we have to run like businesses. And so if I could go down as my legacy, it's not all those programs, right? It is absolutely the lives that we've changed. That is what's most important. It's certainly not how much money I've raised. That is the least of it. That's just what we need in order to change lives.
The means, right? Yeah.
The means to the end. I love every minute of it. I love building the relationships. So I think if I could say a couple of things about nonprofit, one, we have to find the gaps and figure out where our organization fits, right? Number two, you must run like a business. Yes, our missions are a mission of the heart, right? We all have amazing products or services, right? And by the way, when we look at our P&Ls at the end, like we're going into strategic planning right now, we did a product analysis. I'll call it product, right?
Sure.
Program, events, project, whatever you want to call it. How much revenue is it bringing in? What are the expenses to run this program? What's the cost per student? What are the outcomes and the KPIs that we're achieving, right? We are looking at that program by program by program. Now, sometimes the program does not raise enough money from donors that's restricted, right, or designated for that program. But that's why we have unrestricted dollars, because we believe it's really important. And so how do we divvy up that pot of unrestricted dollars, right? It's the same thing a right? A for-profit business has to do. You have to look at what's working. Is it really hitting your North Star, which for us here in JA South Florida is workforce readiness and education. So if it's not hitting our North Star, we're not doing it. I think this is the third thing. And anybody who knows me knows this is my pet peeve. I hate duplication. And as nonprofits, we sometimes chase the dollars.
Right.
Right? Because workforce right now, right? There's a pot. There's a big pot. And so how do we go out and get that? But I've often said that through partnership and collaboration, we can bring down those pots and all benefit, right? So I would say that there are I'll use workforce. There is absolutely a place for workforce education in other organizations. The difference is it's not their core mission. So it's a small piece of what they do. Right? So there isn't that same depth and impact that an organization like JA, or I'll use OIC, right, as another organization who is totally committed. Their core pillar is workforce education, right? For them, it's for, people coming out of our system, right, incarcerated. It's for teen pregnancy, right? They reach a whole different population that we don't serve. I don't want to do what Newton does. I don't want to pull the dollars from Newton. But what we have done is Newton has said, I need some of my people in your pre-apprenticeship program. How do we work together?
There you go.
Right? So if I'm pulling down the funding for the pre-app, why not pull some of those people from OIC?
Yes.
We've done that with Flight, right? We've done it with Hispanic Unity. We've done our career-bound program and then help put those kids in jobs. We have to stop competing and duplicating. When there is something that exists, let's all bring our best qualities and our best work to the table. And funders, here's where I think, and I sat on the funding side, I still do. I sit on the private trust board that gives out funding. I'm the chair of the Early Learning Coalition of Broward. We give out funding, right, to the preschool and early learning. I'm on the Able Trust Board. I don't know. The governor keeps appointing me to all these things. Thank you, Governor. Thank you for the confidence. Able Trust, again, granting dollars to the community for hiring people with disabilities, which is a big thing for me too. And then Career Source Florida, right? The funders, it really is going, that change is going to be driven by funders. If they don't require, right? So if I'm a funder and I want to fund youth employment, but I've got an organization that's putting 10 kids in jobs in their organization, but I've got an organization that has the infrastructure to put 300 or 400 kids in a job, or Career Source, right? Like JA, or Career Source that can put 800 kids in jobs. How do we get all those kids from the other organizations into Career Sources programs, into JA's program? Because they've got the infrastructure to continue to build it and to support those kids with job coaches and employer coaches and all of those things. If the funders aren't driving that collaboration, nonprofits will continue to go after funding. I can't tell you how many times I have gotten asked, well, you have this huge building and it's empty from 2:30 on. Why don't you do an after school program? I said, because I'm not Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, right.
And I don't want to take the focus off of what our mission is. Now, could I turn the after school program into a career, readiness type of program? I could.
Yeah.
Or I could partner with Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
And by the way, I have offered them.
Yeah.
We have this space. If you ever want to do an after school program, you do the after school academic piece and we'll do the entrepreneurship career piece.
Yes.
And let's bring this together and we'll use our facility and we'll apply for funding together. We've not done that, but I'm absolutely open to it. That's where I think we can get better. I think there's room for that.
I wanted to ask you that about getting better, because you talk about earlier about the North Star, and it seems that the North Star seemed for quite a long time to be somewhat stable. You set out some goals and some initiatives. What's keeping you up at night right now with our youth? With a couple of minutes that we have left, what's keeping you up at night with some of the challenges, maybe the youth? Challenges in the businesses today, employing the youth. You've got BizTown today. Are you seeing businesses change? Are you seeing our youth change? And is this happening so quickly? Is this sort of a disruption, maybe even with artificial intelligence? What's keeping you up at night about where the North Star is going to go?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, our country in general, we have probably the lowest student engagement rates we've ever had since COVID, right? The rates have just continued to plummet. So our kids are not showing up, which means we have the highest absenteeism, right? And this is not just Broward, this is across the country. So one of the things is, and I talk about changing systems, right? With 3DE, we're focused on changing the educational model. So that's one thing that keeps me up is, right, how do we engage our young people? We have got to change the way we're teaching and the way we're educating, right? So that's one. So I'm always thinking about how we can do that. We just reimagined our 8th grade program, the Finance Park, and put all AI, VR technology in there. You should see the engagement of these kids. It went from a 2-point-something engagement rate to a 4.8 out of 5.
Fantastic.
There's a leaderboard, a scoreboard. They are competing. It is amazing and so wonderful to watch. But our classrooms don't have that same environment, which is why I think our school district, right, our leader, superintendent, feels so strongly that we need to do more of this kind of stuff. So I think that's one. How do we work together as a community to really figure out how to engage our young people? So that's certainly one. Number 2 is the economic and political climate. I am not going into politics here. I think there's enough to go around. I do worry about that a lot. I just, it's going to affect what we're doing from a funding perspective, right? It could affect us all, state and federal. We recently won the Department of Labor grant youth bill grant for a pre-apprenticeship. Right now, it's signed in ink, but who knows?
Yes.
Right? So we don't know what's going to happen with funding at the federal level, the state level, then it's going to affect the county level. If we're taking away taxes, what is that going to do to our account? I mean, there's just so much
A lot of
that
variables.
could come out of this political climate. And then I think, of course, the economic climate. I think companies are being really cautious about spending right now, hiring. Some are laying off. So I think the economic climate certainly is going to affect it. But I will tell you this to companies, and I say this having been on the business side, the corporate side. One of the investments that I believe you should never, never, ever discontinue or cut out of your budget is your marketing and community relations budget. I come from the world of advertising, but I can tell you there is so much value in investing your marketing dollars and your community relations dollars into organizations that can help you build your brand.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably one of the best ways. I can give you examples of several people I know who had businesses that you have never heard of. And they asked me how they could get involved. How could they help grow their business? I said, take a chunk of money and go big or go home.
Mm-hmm.
Go be the title sponsor of 3 things and get yourself on stage.
Yeah.
Invest with a nonprofit who can help you build your social media brand, right? We're big on marketing because I come from that world.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how it has put their businesses on the map. I'm not saying don't do conventional advertising.
Sure.
But I think that's the last place that they should decrease, right? Their funding. But we need to invest. Every business is complaining about the workforce pipeline, our trades. The baby boomers are retiring. We're losing the construction and the marine engineers and all of those people. They're leaving. Well, we don't have the pipeline. But if you're not willing to pay those salaries, right? And same thing with what we're doing with youth employment. You have CareerSource and JA putting together a little over 1,000 kids in jobs. But we're not asking the businesses to pay the wages.
Mm.
What? How can we sustain this?
Yeah.
How can we get the businesses to understand that when I was 16, people paid me. There was no funding source that came and paid me to go into that job.
Right.
But I can tell you that I did bring value to the organization or the company I was working for.
Sure.
And they invested in me. That's where I learned my skills. You want a pipeline? You have to invest. You can't rely on the Children's Services Council or CareerSource or JA and our private funders to continue to pay the wages. You've got to have some skin in the game. So if I can encourage the businesses to do anything, it would be to continue to build, right? Build on their nonprofit relationships but work with organizations who can help you build your brand through business development or marketing, right? Who you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. Because the last thing you want to do if we go into a recession is cut all your marketing. Because when we come out of that recession, nobody will remember who you are if you've cut all your marketing, right? And I can tell you that from experience back in a recession way before probably your both time.
Wow, thanks, Laurie.
And then invest. We've got to invest in these programs that are getting our kids ready to go into jobs. Go out there and do mock interviews with us. Mentor kids, hire them. We have a 94% retention rate with employers. What does that tell you? That these kids are building.
And they stick around. Yeah.
They're building value in their companies. Guess what? We also have a 20% rate of employers who are offering continued employment. What does that say? That these young people are bringing value.
So first of all, you're the right person for the right job at the right time. And, you know, in testimony of your life, all these challenges. And so we are very thankful that you are in the role that you're in today. As you talk about donors and people that are inquiring, want to hear more about junior achievement, how do they get a hold of you? How do they get a hold of the organization?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I post pretty much every day. So definitely you can message me there. Or you can my cell number. I'm open to it. I don't even know what my business number is, to be honest with you. So I can't even tell you
how about the website?
What JA's number is. But the website is jasouthflorida.org. So you can reach us there. We are all over. Junior Achievement is on every social media site. I'm also on Facebook. It's pretty easy to find us. I think reach out. There's so many opportunities. There's volunteering. There's mentoring. There's investing, right from a sponsorship level to hiring a student. There's just so many opportunities to help prepare the workforce of the future. And I would be remiss if I did not mention this. We have a big board of 75 board members. But when I tell you that they are probably the most engaged, passionate, they are just as passionate and engaged as our team at JA. And it's both of those that go together that really help build the organization and have helped to get it to where it is today. And so these board members were led by Andrew Koenig from City Furniture, who I know is also probably involved here at Levan Center.
Yes.
We can't do it without all of them and our team. So shout out to them because no leader does this alone. I can tell you, this has not been a solo job. This is a team effort.
And I love that. It takes a team for sure. Laurie Sallarulo, President and CEO of Junior Achievement of South Florida. Terrific work. Thank you again for all that you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good
Appreciate
having
it.
you, Laurie.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Center Live podcast and follow us on all social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the podcast, please email Levan Center Live. Our email is innovation@nova.edu.